to the Cosby Highway West Broadway Street Complete Streets Plan Public Workshop #1. We really appreciate you joining us today. Today we're going to give a high-level overview of this plan. I should also mention that there is another plan occurring, a study that's going on in downtown Newport. Our study, though, however, focuses on the West Broadway Street corridor and the Cosby Highway corridor, which is highlighted in the greenish blue color. We're going to talk also a little bit about some of the existing conditions that are out there along West Broadway Street as well as Cosby Highway. Our study area, while we're focusing in on the actual corridors, we are evaluating connectivity to these corridors. So a quarter-mile buffer is our study area, which is again illustrated there with the blue-green line work. We're also going to be talking about the draft vision and goals and some of the engagement that we've had to date, through our survey and wiki map. We'll talk about some of the next steps in this project. And again, we just want to hear from you all and encourage you to visit the online survey and wiki map. So this plan is being funded by a TDOT Community Transportation Planning Grant. We're focusing again on that Cosby Highway, West Broadway Street corridors. The fairgrounds is up there on the northwestern terminus, and Walmart on the southern terminus along Cosby Highway. Major dates for this project, we're looking at completing the plan, wrapping it all up by the end of July. We will be having a second public workshop in late May, where we will go over some of the draft recommendations as well as hear input from the community on those draft recommendations. So what exactly are complete streets? Complete streets is essentially just providing the right street in the right place. So ensuring that the design of the roadway as well as the facilities that are provided for bicycles and pedestrians make sense for that context and for the types and amount of users that are out there. The ultimate goal is really to provide safe and convenient connections, particularly for the most vulnerable users of the transportation system, so those on foot or bicycling. Some of the high-level outcomes of this plan effort will be some infrastructure recommendations. So maybe that might include roadway improvements such as restriping, could also include certainly pedestrian and bicycling recommendations for infrastructure. One of the other major deliverables is the design guidelines. This is essentially where we will be identifying for each segment of our study corridors the cross section that is most appropriate for what is out there today, but also what we envision those corridors to be in the future. And then finally, a complete streets policy is going to be developed and provided as well. And this essentially formalizes the community's commitment to considering all roadway users when designing a roadway. Having a policy like this also positions the community well for securing grants from TDOT, for example, for construction of new sidewalk, for example. So the fact that Newport now has a plan that kind of outlines recommended improvements, and as well as the community having a complete streets policy, signals to TDOT that Newport is committed to providing safe and comfortable corridors. So some of the existing conditions along our first corridor, West Broadway Street. This is an image of the existing zoning map with the dashed line there being West Broadway Street. The majority of the uses along this section of the corridor are commercial, so retail. There's a couple of shopping centers, food establishments, largely drive-through. The development pattern is largely suburban in style, in that parking lots, are provided in front of commercial businesses, for example. There is also a couple of shopping centers that exist towards the northwest end of the corridor as well. And then once you get off the corridor, again, we're going to be looking at connectivity to the corridor from these areas such as the yellow with R1, R2, those are residential areas. So certainly looking for connectivity back to the corridor. Then there's also further off the corridor, some existing industrial manufacturing uses. So in terms of the existing conditions of West Broadway, at least on the most western side, it's a 5-lane cross section, very wide. It does have curb and gutter. There are shoulders. There's 2 travel lanes in each direction with a 2-way center turn lane. There are no sidewalks, however, in this section of the study corridor. As we move along east towards downtown Newport, West Broadway Street slightly changes in that the right-of-way gets a lot more narrow, approximately 80 feet if you look across the highway. There are no shoulders in this section as illustrated in the cross section there, and there is very limited sidewalk as well. The map that is before you is showing basically a heat density of the number of crashes, vehicular, bikes, peds, all that, basically showing where your hotspots are. And the main hotspot, at least for this section or this corridor, is the intersection between West Broadway Street and Cosby Highway that does experience a higher number of crashes. The numbers that you see on your screen those are your average annual daily traffic numbers, so your number of vehicles per day on average. As to be expected, West Broadway has the highest amount of traffic. It's to be expected given the size of Newport and kind of the structure of the roadway network, as well as the uses given the destinations of commercial, again, being critical destinations for the community. Oops. Okay, and this map is showing existing sidewalk where there's at least sidewalk on at least one side. There is a proposed segment of sidewalk that will be coming down the pipeline through a TDOT multimodal access grant for construction. And basically that's at the northern end of Cosby Highway and completing the existing sidewalk gap, along Cosby to West Broadway. And then the sidewalk will extend west along West Broadway to Hedrick Drive. As part of that coming project, there will also be intersection improvements along West Broadway. So being able to provide a little bit safer crossings across the corridor in that location, specifically given the high school located there to the south. For the greenways, that's the dashed green line that you are seeing there. From the west side, that is essentially pulling some recommendations from a previous plan. It's a similar study as this one that was completed, I believe, in 2018. And on that section of the corridor out towards the interstate, there are some recommendations for some proposed greenway side paths, as well as buffered bike lanes. And again, that's on towards the interstate, but we will most certainly be considering and carrying through those connection recommendations from that end of the corridor and on into downtown. And then finally, the other proposed sidewalk that you see is an eventual extension. This is a long-term vision of the community, but eventually the goal is to connect to the existing the existing Riverwalk that is in downtown Newport and extending it west along the Pigeon River and up La Sega Boulevard eventually to the industrial park. So those are kind of the existing and future expected improvements as it relates to sidewalks and greenways in the study area. Level of traffic stress. That is essentially a way to score roadways, segments and intersections, and kind of to get a feel for what kind of environment do pedestrians and bicyclists face when they're out in these areas. And essentially a level of traffic stress 1, you can consider as being the least stressful. Level of traffic stress 4, the red, is the most stressful segments. And as you can see here on the map, really your higher volume, your major roadways are the the most stressful, just given the amount of traffic, the speed of the traffic, and then this section of our study area, the lack of sidewalks is also making those connections more stressful. The same goes for bicyclists. It's a little bit different of a scoring methodology, but is certainly built on the same premise. So again, the point of this map is that you can really see where there are barriers, both to travel along the corridor, but as well as to get across the corridor. So the project recommendations that we're aiming to develop as part of this plan are going to be aimed at how do we make some of these locations less stressful for the majority of the population that might be walking and bicycling. Now we're going to take a look at Cosby Highway. So this is on the northern end. The terminus is West Broadway near downtown, adjacent to downtown. It's a similar corridor in that the uses are largely commercial, also in a suburban development style, as you can see here on the picture to the left. Many of the food establishments are drive-through, so it's certainly more of a vehicle-centered corridor with commercial all along it, and again, residential off the corridor. And so we'll certainly, again, be looking for connectivity to those neighborhoods to Cosby Highway as well. The northern section of Cosby Highway is a 5-lane cross section similar to West Broadway Street. It does have curb and gutter. The right-of-way is roughly generally 84 feet. There are no shoulders in this section of the corridor. However, there are sidewalks on both sides, which is certainly beneficial for those walking. And even along the northern side of the corridor, those sidewalks have buffers, so green space in between kind of those travel lanes, providing a little bit least stressful of an experience than those that are right up against the roadway. The southern portion of Cosby varies certainly because of the interchange, and then as well as on the southern end of Newport city limits, the roadway kind of opens up with greater right-of-way and shoulders. However, it does still maintain that 5-lane cross section with the center turn lane in the middle. This section also does have curb and gutter as well. And the right-of-way, again, it varies based at the interstate interchange. It's roughly 70 feet to 250 feet at its widest portions. Okay, this is also showing the crash heat map. This is of crashes that have occurred in the last 5 years. So you can see those crash hotspots occurring at your major roadway intersections, with, again, that West Broadway Street being one of the higher nodes of hotspots for crashes. And again, here you can see the average annual daily traffic, again, to be expected. The highest volumes are found along Cosby Highway, and they get less as you get away from the corridor. Sidewalks and greenways. There's definitely more sidewalk infrastructure existing in this portion of the study area than there was along the West Broadway Street area. In the image to the left there, you can see an example of the infrastructure and Cosby Highway. And this in particular is where the curb ramps for the sidewalks have been updated to be ADA compliant, so that folks in wheelchairs and or pushing strollers can easily access the sidewalk infrastructure. And as you can tell, on the southern end of Cosby Highway, we're certainly going to focus some of our effort down there to see how we can extend walking and bicycling opportunities to those areas, because there's nothing currently planned in those areas, nor is there existing infrastructure. So we'll certainly be looking at recommendations on the southern end as well. Level of traffic stress, this is for the pedestrians. The intersections are all fairly stressful, and while there are signals at some of those intersections, there are not striped crosswalks or pedestrian signal heads giving pedestrians the right of way at the traffic signal. Therefore, they are considered to be very stressful for pedestrians. So we'll also be looking at, again, crossing improvements, just as we will be with West Broadway. This is the level of traffic stress for bicyclists. Again, you're kind of seeing a similar situation as you did on West Broadway. There are more signalized intersections along Cosby Highway, which you're seeing the blue dots there. For a cyclist, a traffic signal makes that crossing the least stressful because a bicyclist acts as a vehicle. So just if you think driving, pulling out onto a highway, that signal gives you the right of way. So for bicyclists, those are your lower stress intersections and making those crossings. Some of the engagement to date, we've had great response on the online survey and Wikimap. I should say that they are, the survey and the Wikimap is consolidated for both of the planning projects. So the corridor study as well as the one that's occurring in downtown. It is open for one more week. It will be closed on April 22nd. And we've had over 135 surveys completed thus far with some additional comments made on the mapping option. So some of the things that we've heard so far, the top destinations, at least within our study area, the top three were by far downtown, the fairgrounds toward the northwest end of the West Broadway Street corridor, and then the old Tanner School, Walter State Community College. We also posed a question to the respondents in terms of, well, how should Newport focus their dollars in terms of expanding the network or maintaining the network? And the majority of respondents responded to expand infrastructure in areas with little or no existing infrastructure. So think back towards that southern end of Cosby Highway. There was also several comments, especially on the mapping application, to look into back access of commercial properties along both corridors for opportunities to include greenways so that you could provide a separate facility away from the corridors and the vehicle traffic, but providing a safe, completely separate facility on the back side of the buildings, just again for a little least stressful and safer walking and biking opportunities. And then 93% of the respondents, they strongly agreed that they would walk more or bike more if these two corridors in particular were a little bit more walkable and bikeable. So there's certainly untapped potential in Newport. The draft vision and goals of the plan, we've developed this working with the community and with the city staff. This is a draft vision that we're certainly looking for input on. This is a long-term vision, and that being Cosby Highway and West Broadway Street provide safe and comfortable walking and bicycling connections for residents and visitors alike in support of the community's vision to be an active gateway community to the Smokies, complete with a vibrant downtown. In order to reach that long-term vision, some of the goals that this plan will move forward include promoting Newport as a gateway community. That is an effort that Newport in previous planning efforts has identified to be a gateway community to the Smokies and to really tap into the outdoor potential that the community has, just given its location at the foot of the Smoky Mountains. The second goal to reach that overall long-term vision is to improve traffic and safety. The third is to optimize street design for all users. So again, providing that complete street in the right place. And then the final goal was to support active lifestyles. That's something that's been identified in previous planning documents of the city as well, that there's a desire for residents of Newport to be able to walk or bike out of recreation or for utility purposes as well. So the next steps for this planning effort, the project team will be completing the needs assessment. Then we'll be drafting recommendations again for pedestrian bicycle infrastructure networks, as well as potential roadway improvements. And then we'll be working towards a public workshop, the second one, which will occur late May. And we will be presenting those draft recommendations for feedback from you all on what we might be missing or where things might need to be tweaked. So we hope that you will join us for the second workshop at late May. And again, we really encourage you, if you have not, to provide your input specifically through the survey and/or mapping application. These opportunities are provided through the city website, and you can also reach out directly to the project team if you have questions or would like to provide specific input. Thank you for taking the time to join us, and we hope to see you in May.
All right, thank you, team, for that. If you brave soldiers have made it to the end of the video, feel free to comment in the comment section here on Facebook or YouTube, however you have enjoyed this video. Otherwise, watch for updates, and we will see you at the next meeting in May. Thank you.